All right. Good morning, everybody. Luke's MTG here. One of the things that I wanted to talk about would be Jeskai Stoneblade today in Legacy. Now, this is a deck that I've been playing for a couple of years now. Just really casually, your FNM style stuff, just some MTGO, tournament practice and the occasional league. And I was perusing the legacy list on MTG Goldfish, and one of the things that I came across was this Jeskai Stoneblade list by BalenciagaNBoba. So this was a 5-0 that happened on the 25th of December, or Christmas for those of you that celebrate that. And I kind of went back and looked at the history of this player, and I've noticed that they've been producing some 5-0s, been trophying lots and lots and lots of leagues with this Jeskai Stoneblade list, or some manner of blue, red, white deck in Legacy, almost on a weekly basis now for quite some time. So I wanted to give props to this player, and just want to say that they are probably a little more on the up and up with the way that Jeskai Stoneblade fits into the Legacy meta. But I've saw some interesting things here that this player has chosen to do that not a lot of other players do with the Stoneblade list, which I'm going to kind of get into here. I'm going to point those things out, and then I'm going to pop over to this other window that I have open to discuss some of the changes that I've made to this list, just, through my own volition. Okay. So one of the things that really kind of sticks out to me here is the counterbalance. And, historically counterbalance has been a much more powerful card thanks to something like Sensei's Divining Top, but we haven't had that for quite some time. So overall, my experience with this card has been negative. When it's really going and it's powerful, it works great, and it seems like something that, oh my god, this is such a powerful card. I'm countering this spell, I'm countering that spell. Before you know it, you've countered 3 spells, and it just seems like an all-star. But for the most part, I just have not had a good experience with this card. Especially, now that we have cards like Murktide Region that cost, 7 mana that people are regularly casting, which is something that tends to end games pretty quickly, and a counterbalance looks pretty foolish in the face of a Murktide Region. Obviously, the blue-red Delver deck being the number 1 deck in the format right now. So I chose to open this counterbalance. Another thing is going to be Sword of Feast and Famine. I have very rarely seen this card used in Legacy. Truthfully, I'm not quite sure what that's for, especially since, like I said, the blue-red Murktide, Delver, Ragavan deck is so powerful. I'm surprised to see this in here versus a Sword of Fire and Ice, but I'm sure that BalenciagaNBoba here has their reasons. So let's kind of get into it. As far as the creatures go, I haven't changed anything with my list. You can see 3 Snapcaster Mage, 4 Stoneforge Mystic, 1 True Name Nemesis. Same thing for the Planeswalkers. I kind of like the split that they have here. Jace has proven to be a very powerful card. We already know that. He's been around for a long time, and you just want to be able to cast that guy. But where I start to make minor little changes here are going to be in the instants and sorceries. So we can see that BalenciagaNBoba here has 3 prismatic endings. This is a card that I think has proven to be a 4 of. My experience with it has been great. Obviously, it checks all kinds of boxes here. And Legacy right now is very permanent based. Even when you're facing decks like Doomsday, being able to snag a Lotus Petal or a Lion's Eye Diamond that they've kind of left sitting there vulnerable is a huge deal. So I just think this card is good in just about every matchup. So I like having access to Prismatic Ending, especially since all of our red cards are going to be in the sideboard. And we have this player has chosen to include a basic mountain and a volcanic island in their main deck where there are no red spells. I think that if you're going to choose to make these red inclusions in your mana base, you should definitely leverage that more with 4 prismatic endings. You can see here that I have chosen to do kind of to take advantage of those. And then Here we have Force of Negation. I really like Force of Negation. Of course, it's really useful to have extra Force of Wills in your combo matchup. And one particular matchup where I've noticed I missed Force of Negation the most is in the lands matchup. Historically, lands has been pretty strong against the blue mid-range slash control style decks, just because the tools that you have in your main deck um, don't really attack their game plan that well, and being able to force a negation, here we are, a Life from the Loam is a big deal. But I've got something here in my sideboard that I can kind of discuss here in just a little bit. Next thing we got are going to be the artifacts. 4 Stoneforge Mystic to me in the main deck kind of demands 3 equipment, especially since we've got access to 3 Jaces. We're going to be seeing lots of cards. So I would really like to have 3 equipments, and I've chosen Umezawa's Jit to be my 3rd equipment here in the main deck because Elves is such... frankly, it's kind of running rampant right now in the leagues. A lot of people are farming leagues with Elves, so Umezawa's Jite is really powerful there. Can also be pretty good against, Death and Taxes. Kind of good at nabbing those early, maybe not early, but kind of good at cleaning up Ragavans or Dragon Reach Channelers, Thalias, things of the like in the mid game once you've been able to connect with that. And in order to make room for that Umezawa's Jite, I've dropped the counterbalance for the reasons stated earlier. Not going to add too much more to that. Next thing we got here is going to be the mana base. So I mentioned this player here having a volcanic island and a snow-covered mountain in the main deck. And that, of course, is because we don't want to have a bunch of lands in our sideboard. And this isn't too mana intensive of a deck. We have lots of blue pips, but we've got 8 blue producing sources here in our main deck, and then of course the 4 fetch lands that can get those. 8 fetch lands. I've noticed that this Prismatic Vista is a little bit easier to jam into the deck now that Prismatic Ending has taken the place of Council's Judgment, so it's much easier on the white pips in the main deck. However, I still think that having access to Tundra is important, especially when we have white cards as well as all these double blue cards such as Jace, Narset, and True Name Nemesis. So in order to kind of accommodate grabbing those red lands without hindering our ability to grab blue too much, I've traded 1 Prismatic Vista for an additional Scalding Tarn, and that Scalding Tarn is of course still going to be able to get our Snow-Covered Mountain, which Prismatic Vista kind of does the job of, but can also get our Volcanic Island if we need the extra red as well as a blue to cast a later Jace or True Name Nemesis. And it can also grab our Tundra in case we've somehow already drawn our Snow-Covered Mountain or drawn a Volcanic Island. And then the final thing that I want to get into is the sideboard. So here, BalenciagaNBoba has chosen Leyline of the Void, which I think has been really good against the Reanimator matchup. Obviously, good against any graveyard matchup. That's just what the card does. But some changes I've made is obviously moving the Umezawa's Jite to the main deck. And I've traded the Sword of Feast and Famine for Sword of Fire and Ice. And I mentioned not having Force of Negation and how that can affect our lands matchup. So one thing that I've included here is Sabo's Web. And this is actually a pretty hot little piece of tech that I picked up from watching a Bosch and Roll video. I think he was playing some kind of blue-black ninjas when he kind of introduced this as a sideboard card. So for those of you that haven't seen this before, this is 2 generic mana for an artifact called Sabo's Web. So when it enters the battlefield, you actually get to draw a card. So it's nice to have a little piece of sideboard hate that can replace itself in cantrip. So what this does is it is kind of similar to Back to Basics, but it's a little bit different in that lands with an activated ability that don't produce mana do not untap during their controller's untap steps. So this is going to help dramatically, or help you drastically in the lands matchup. This is also good against something like a Rishadan's Port or Rishadan Port. Wasteland, sometimes your opponents just have to use the Wasteland to cast their spells, so sometimes you can get them with this. Great against Karakas, although Karakas doesn't really hurt us here, but I've seen a lot of Karakas in the 4-color Yorion piles, and of course, sometimes they'll load those up with the Abundant Growth. If, for instance, they notice that you're playing a lot of basics just like we are, and they notice that you're not using a lot of Wastelands, or if you don't have them at all, which is common for the Stoneblade decks, just because you want to be using all your mana all the time, so you can't really afford to be firing off Wastelands and essentially missing land drops. So you can nab a Karakas that has an Abundant Growth on it. You can hit basically every card in the lands deck, save, of course, for their lands without activated abilities. But I've tried this out a couple of times, and I actually like it quite a bit. And, of course, how bad could it be, 2 mana to replace itself? It kind of reminds me of Dress Down, but I think this can also hit those Urza Sagas, but not as effectively clean up the tokens like Dress Down would. But that's why we've got Meltdown here. This is something that's been very popular ever since the Urza Saga decks have kind of come into the fray thanks to the Modern Horizons 2 printing. So Meltdown kind of helps us with that. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of compare and contrast a deck that I really enjoy playing with one of its most popular, maybe not most popular, but one of its most famous pilots that certainly knows how to put up lots of good results. Everybody kind of likes to make their choices, so I figured I'd kind of showcase some of my adjustments to this great deck by this great player. So thanks a lot for watching, and hopefully I can get in some games here pretty soon. Take care.